Hi guys, how's it going? Today's video is basically an appeal of you to get onto your keyboards as quickly as possible and get a message through to the MPs in the marginal constituency to take their finger out of their respective backsides and put a stop to the madness that has enveloped the UK before it is too late. Now, I know that many of you will shout out, hey, it's already too late. But being the type of bloke that I am, I want to tell you that it's never too late. There is a saying penned by the great Shakespeare himself that says the truth will always win out, or words to that effect anyway. And I want to believe that it will. So let's go. Sorry guys, now, have to say it, if it's not too much trouble, may I ask that if you think it's appropriate to do so, that you share the link to this video across whatever social media platforms you can, whether by Discord, WhatsApp, Twitter, etc., so that we can get the message out there. Now, as you've probably become aware by now, the EU have gone a very long way to appease our Oompa Loompa, Lord Frost, and our great leader, Bojo the Clown. The evidence that the Conservatives have been caught yet again flat-footed is not by what has happened since Šefčovič has released the detail of that EU compromise, but more to do with the fact that the usual suspects that we've become accustomed to being lined up to conduct media interviews to basically find fault with either the trade and cooperation agreement or the withdrawal agreement, and of course, excuse me, point the fingers at the EU, have all basically disappeared into the ether like a fart in the wind. Surprisingly, however, I don't think this is good news. I don't think it's good news at all. And let me tell you why I am concerned here. Right, the EU have moved recently on two issues since that historic announcement, which only happened last week, okay? The first that has come to light is the news that the European Central Bank have become more active and certainly more direct with their instructions to the players in London to hasten getting in place the mechanisms required in order for the city to be ready for mid-2022 when all of the terms of the TCA will be implemented, okay? However, the second and the one that's going to be felt quicker by the masses is the move by the Trade Commission just last week to call in the customs control authorities from all of the EU's 27 member states to let them know that they need to ensure that goods imported into the EU comply with the rules of origin agreement reached in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. You see, up until now, but ending in January the 1st, 2022, importers of UK goods needed, up until now, they needed to ensure that their UK suppliers had the necessary documentation to prove that the goods they received are manufactured in the UK, and they're also basically using UK sourced or EU sourced raw materials. Now, up until now, a simple letter of declaration by the manufacturers of such was accepted as proof of origin. But that's about to change, and the rules that apply to every other third country will apply to the UK also. And the EU needs those terms of the TCA enforced. Now, we're going to hear submissions from Sir Ivan Yates to the House of Commons Select Committee. Now, this guy was basically Mr. UK in EU negotiations, but unfortunately, prior to the Oompa Loompa. But unfortunately for the UK, he resigned around the same time as Theresa May's career as PM was drawing to a close. But he worked under Blair, he worked under Cameron, and he worked under May. The first point he makes quite clearly, and from the very outset of his submission, is that Brexit cannot be categorized as an event, no matter what Bojo or the Oompa Loompa wants to say, okay? But it can be categorized more so as a process. And it was something that those not familiar with complex trade negotiations were made fully aware of. They were made fully aware of it. He also says that there was a complete lack of understanding from the political classes in Westminster. Let's take a listen to this 52-second clip.
The process not event thing was, I think, the fundamental misapprehension amongst a lot of the political class in both before the referendum and immediately afterwards. There was, brave and confident and rather blithe talk that, this would be the easiest trade deal in history, and the trade deal itself would be struck before exit, which is not, of course, what Article 50 prescribes and was never going to happen. And, of course, as I totally understand, from the point of view of ministers and those not steeped in either EU negotiations or trade negotiations, it sounds absurd that it's going to take several years, perhaps the better part of a decade, to get to an equilibrium state the other side of Brexit, which is obviously what I was saying both inside government before I resigned and at the time I resigned, and have said it since. And I don't resile from any of it, because I think it's self-evidently true and being proven true by what's happened in the first 32 months.
So, as you can hear for yourselves, he predicted what would happen, and as you will hear in the next clip, he knew exactly what the real issues were way back then, and by the way, said it many times, both verbally and in writing, to Number 10 and to other journalists. And he said it in just 16 seconds.
But the reality was that withdrawal was always going to be about financial terms, the rights of citizens, various odds and ends that need to be tied up, and of course the Irish border, which has in the end the backstop question, come to dominate the whole thing, despite barely getting a mention during the referendum campaign.
Look, we know things have moved on since then, but COVID basically put the brakes on further divergence from the single market. And as we're about to hear in this 2-minute excerpt, it's 2 minutes, but it's worth it, from an interview in February of this year, pre-COVID lockdown and all that stuff that went with it, that what we are seeing now is exactly what the UK government wanted and fully understood, okay, with regard to the TCA. They got exactly what they wanted.
You advise industry, Ivan, and you advise people across business. What should they take away from it? I mean, we've seen in the first 6 weeks of this deal, a lot of industries sort of waking up to the fact that they can no longer do hub distribution out of the UK because of rules of origin, preventing them importing stuff and then sending it back into the EU without attracting tariffs. A lot of worry about the lack of a mobility chapter, nothing in there to allow musicians and rock stars, but also all the other people who do services trade to go into the EU, but also a lot of sort of demands for fixes from various industries. So what should they read into the Frost appointment?
Yeah. I think what's fascinating to watch when you're dealing with the captains of industry and with many business federations, frankly, is that it does take a long while to sink in. And although intellectually many of them say they bought that proposition and recognized where things were going, there is still, as you say, and we're seeing it surface all over the place now, an expectation of, oh, well, they can't really have wanted that, and they can't really have realized that this was the true implication for our sector. So if we go and lobby them now and demonstrate to them what's happening on the ground as a consequence of the deal they've negotiated, they must want to rejig it, refine it, and reopen the negotiation in 2021. I suppose in shorthand, my advice is, don't believe it, guys. We are where we are. There isn't a new negotiation to be had. There's no appetite on either side of the table to reopen it. I don't think that's where David Frost or his boss will be or will want to be. I think you should get on with life and face the shock. I think it's a mistake on the part of the government, frankly, to carry on not really being straight with the public about what the implications of the choice were.
Now, you can hear clearly that Sir Ivan knows that the UK government had been, continues to, and looks set to continue to mislead the public. And therein lies a message that needs to be hammered home, and it should be reflected in every email, in every tweet, and in every other form of communication. It needs to focus the voters' attention on the facts, not the fiction, and that is that the people that voted for Brexit had been deceived, that the politicians that supported Brexit spun the story in those marginal constituencies they either need to own up to their own behaviour, or they will be forced to resign for telling lies. The UK has too many liars. End of story. That's the line. They're basically hogging the airwaves of print media. If the politicians in these marginal constituencies start to receive factual letters that highlight the lies that such a politician subscribed to, supported by videos of Sir Ivan, they will become nervous, because whatever they said is contradicted by the man who's on the ground, and it's all coming true. Now, don't get me wrong, those guys won't care so much if they receive a few dozen emails that contain this as the core of the message, but guys, they sure will if they receive just 100 carefully written communiques that holds them to account. It doesn't take thousands upon thousands, it just takes a few hundred, okay? Things are going to get a hell of a lot worse, unfortunately, before they get better. And I fear that the UK simply cannot survive the supply shock she's about to endure. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all on the flip side. You take care. Bye-bye.